Hi there, and welcome back to another edition of ScaleUp Radio, the podcast inspired by the Entrepreneurial ScaleUp System and designed to make navigating our scale-up journeys that little bit easier by learning from others' experiences. I'm Kevin Brent, and today I'm joined by Antonio Wedral, and he is the co-founder of NOVOS, a specialised e-commerce SEO agency that recently became employee-owned. And in this episode, Antonio shares how NOVOS focuses on providing SEO's value, the transformative journey to employee ownership in 2022, and I found that a fascinating part of the discussion, and the benefits that that's derived, including increased motivation and accountability among the staff. And we'll explore NOVOS's commitment as well to transparency, rigorous training, and a strong company culture that attracts top talent. And Antonio also discusses their selective 3-stage hiring process and how becoming a B Corp validated their sustainable practices. Make sure you don't miss any future episodes by subscribing to ScaleUp Radio wherever you like to listen to your podcasts, and you can also nominate a guest for ScaleUp Radio if you know someone with an interesting scale-up story like Antonio's, and you can find out how in the show notes below. And also in the show notes, you can find details to Antonio's own podcast that he hosts called Founder to Leader, which you might like to check out. So for now, tune in for an inspiring conversation about innovation and growth in the SEO industry. Welcome to another episode of ScaleUp Radio. I'm delighted today to be joined by Antonio Wedral, who is the co-founder of NOVOS. So Antonio, welcome to ScaleUp Radio.
Thank you very much. Yes, good to be on.
Brilliant. So I'm really looking forward to this. So tell us all about NOVOS. What's it all about?
NOVOS. So NOVOS is our baby. It was born around sort of 6.5, 7 years ago. So we set up the agency, myself and Sam, my co-founder. We were both agency side together before. So Sam actually hired me for my very first job out of uni. He was my manager. We then both went our separate ways for a few years and careers. We were both in-house. We stayed in touch as friends. He headed up SEO at made.com and I headed up the marketing at the Gentleman's Journal magazine. We were both looking to hire SEO agencies, and I think we both just realized that we were getting sold the exact same pitch by the exact same sort of faces that have been around for a very long time, using the same processes. There was nothing really new or great about it. So we just said, let's do it ourselves. Let's do SEO. Let's make SEO great, but at the same time, let's do it just for e-commerce and retail brands. So that's what we do. We do SEO as a channel for e-commerce and retail brands all around the world. And yeah, we've scaled it over the last few years.
Yeah. So, and what sort of stage have you scaled it to?
So we've scaled it, so there's just under 40 of us. So we scaled it to an employee ownership as well. So we became employee owned back in 2022. Yeah. So Sam and I basically sold the majority of our shares to the team. This was like a good way to avoid what usually happens in typical M&As, I think, in the agency world, where the agency just doesn't exist anymore. Founders gone. We kind of saw this as a great way to do something different in our industry, some more sustainable long term. So the plan now is to obviously become like as profitable as possible, so become as efficient as we can, so then that benefits obviously the entire team.
Yeah, so I definitely want to get into the learnings around employee ownership trust. I think that would be something that people will be very interested in, and I know lots of clients that we have are considering various options, and that's one of the ones that always comes up. So that'd be really good to do that. Before we do that, then, what was the reason for focusing on retail and e-commerce essentially? What was your reason there?
We just enjoy it as an industry. It's easy to prove ROI with SEO. So rather than, I generated you 2 leads this month through SEO, we can actually contribute and say we generated X million pounds in revenue. You can take that off, you can then compare that with paid. So for us, it was just a case of we love the industry. We wanted to work with brands that we would be our own, we would be customers of. And at the same time, we wanted something that we can actually show the tangible benefits of SEO as a channel, because it got a pretty bad rep over the last sort of 10 to 15 years. Yeah. So that's why we did it.
And what, you mentioned that, and you mentioned a bit before, what do you do that separates you? What do you do differently then that separates you from everybody else that's out there?
What separates us? Obviously, because we're e-commerce specialists, I know we're experts within e-com and SEO. So within the space, I've no doubt, I think we've got most knowledgeable team when it comes to e-commerce SEO. So we know how stores are structured. We understand all of the different platforms. We're very close and well connected with all the different CMSs, i.e. Shopify, Magento, and all the softwares and platforms and tools that come with it. In terms of like our process and training, so we invested a lot in process and training development as an agency, because that's the only way we could always remain great. So we've got a really rigorous development platform program here. So in terms of training, we invest a lot into individual training, team training, both external and internal. And then when it comes to processes, we're constantly reviewing and revamping our processes every sort of few months. That's the only way that we can sort of stay ahead of everyone. So I think that's always been our USP is we get the industry, we get SEO, that's all we do. So rather than, a lot of agencies do SEO and PPC or introduce different channels, we just wanted to focus on this. And we were told multiple times that's going to be quite limited. It'll cap you at a certain point. You're going to have to branch out. We don't need to. There's enough businesses and retailers out there. There's enough people that need SEO support. So we just thought, let's go for it.
Yeah, I think that's often a misunderstanding with people, the idea of being clear on your niche. People think, oh, that's going to constrict me or whatever else. Yep. But at the end of the day, if your niche is a big enough niche and you can become expert enough in it, then and get to the point of the size of business that you want, then that's probably a much better strategy than trying to be a bit more of a generalist in several areas. So very good. And I'm interested as well with, so you set up with Sam, you said that Sam originally employed you. How was that like when you actually went in together? Did you go in as equal partners? Is there still a little bit of that, well, I was your boss sort of thing, or how does that work?
No, yeah, we went into equal partners. Someone asked me about it recently on my podcast, which I've got probably about a month ago. Someone asked me about it, and it's an interesting dynamic because I wouldn't have gone into business with Sam if I'd felt inferior in any sort of way, because I just don't think it would have worked. It would have clashed. But no, from day one, there was mutual respect. I think he respects me the same way I do him. I don't think he saw me as someone junior. I didn't see him as anyone more senior. I think at that point when we decided to go into business as equal partners, I think we both saw each other as equal, and we still do now. So yeah, it's never been an issue, never been a concern. The respect is mutual there, I think, as it was on day one. So for us anyway, we're quite lucky. It's never been an issue. And outside of obviously business and work, we are good friends as well. So I think, I don't think that's ever been an issue. Yeah,
brilliant. And how does the money work? I think we're probably familiar with how it works, but how do you make money?
How do we make money? So 90-ish% of our revenue is from retainers. So a retainer model with brands. So a retail brand will see the opportunity. They want to invest in SEO. We will show them how great we are and the size of the prize for them. As a result, then we've got our pricing and packages where we get them onto a retainer. So we then offer them that support every single month to be there. Basically be their outsourced SEO team, but act as an extension of their team. The other 10% is sort of made up of projects, migrations to platforms, those kinds of things. So that's pretty much the two main ways that we make our money. We obviously make some sponsorship income. So we run events throughout the year. Obviously from that, we get sponsors. So there's sort of income from that, but most of our revenue is obviously from the brands that we work with.
Great. So 90%-ish recurring revenue. What are some of the key metrics that you measure there? Retention rates, presumably. What sort of lifetime value would you have of a customer then?
Lifetime value, typically, obviously we've only been going for like sort of 6.5, 7 years anyway, but lifetime value for us is typically sort of like around the 2-year mark. Yeah. So I think for us, that's the sweet spot as well, because that's at a good point where a brand will usually come to us and say, we're bringing this in-house now. And ultimately, I think that means that we've done our job well, because we've proven the case for SEO as a channel to the point where they want to invest in full-time staff. Yeah. We obviously track sort of retention rate. We obviously track any sort of like churn rates, for example, like the client service team we've got here. They've got a lot of metrics that they track. I think the main one that we're always focused on outside of our own business is obviously clients. So the brands, so what is their sort of non-branded growth in terms of revenue and traffic? Because ultimately that'll tell us a lot about, are they seeing the value to want to stay with us? So if they're not, obviously that's a precursor to think, well, will they want to invest in us long-term? Perhaps not if they're not seeing the returns. If they are, we obviously know we don't want to worry about this client. We want to continue to long-term plan for them.
Great. And how do you find your own clients? Is that SEO by any chance?
You know what? Most of it's word of mouth. So like we've basically built our entire agency on referrals. So from partners of ours to clients and then ex-clients, ex-employees, whoever it is, it's usually just a referral. We obviously do get inbound naturally, but I've always found that's been lower quality than just someone that introduces us. Yeah. So yeah, most of our clients, I would say, have come from some kind of recommendation or referral. The others have obviously come through inbound. So they've just searched for e-commerce SEO agencies, or they look at award lists and stuff like that.
Okay, good. So what have been some of the key milestones? Then you set up sort of 6.5 years ago-ish. So what are some of the key milestones along the way?
Key milestones. I think the first key milestone for us was hiring our first employee. I think that's when we kind of realized we've taken this from a lifestyle business to, do you want to grow an agency? Let's just go for it. So that was the first sort of key milestone for us, I think. I think the second key milestone definitely then COVID kind of hit at that point, but I think the second key milestone was actually scaling the team past that initial sort of like 20 people, where first 20 people, everything's usually quite rosy dandy, everything's great. Beyond that, you've then got to really figure out your processes and sort of like internal structure. And I think the next one was sort of going employee owned. We weren't ready to give up the company, but at the same time, we knew the value of the company was at a really good stage. We were getting offers externally to acquire us. We couldn't just keep batting them off. We needed some kind of plan. So I think then, transitioning to an EOT was obviously the next big milestone. And I guess, the next big milestone beyond this, I guess we'll see what that is.
And you're a B Corp, registered B Corp as well, I believe, aren't you?
Yeah, so we became B Corp. Yeah, so we got the certification towards the end of last year, early this year.
And what was the motivation behind doing that?
So when we set up the agency, one of the things that we always said is we want this agency to just do better. So again, whether that was by people, by brands, let's just do something that does better, and let's prove you can make money, you can be a profitable company without just being just not very nice to work with or for. So I think then throughout the process, when we became an employee-owned company, a lot of the initiatives we've got in-house, a lot of the stuff that we care about, the brands that we work with, we kind of realize we're in this bubble where perception matters, and what you're doing, you need to just, you can't just say we're doing all these things, you need to just prove it. Yeah. So I think us going B Corp, that was like a way for us to not just follow a crowd of people doing it, but actually to prove on paper, like we're certified for the things that we say. We don't just say that we do things in a fancy deck. We do them and it's been proven. So
great. So you from a people point of view, you've grown quite rapidly, obviously turnover, but also the people coming through, so scaling rapidly beyond 20 people, and you said it's 40 now, that brings its own challenges in managing people. And I believe, you mentioned your first milestone of taking on your first couple of employees. I believe they're still working with you. So you're getting something right with hiring and retaining people. So what's your secret there? What's your lessons learned there?
Do you know what? We don't get it perfect. I don't think any company does. As much as I'd love to say I think it's perfect, it isn't. We have kept, you're right. So the first sort of like handful of employees that we hired, two of them being like, we hired a leadership team very early on because we knew we needed people to take that on rather than just juniors to do work. And obviously Dan and Olivia are still with us now, and they're like behind sort of me and Sam as founders, they're the two running the company, and they're still with us today. I think for us, it's always just been sort of honesty and transparency. I think you can probably tell we're very to the point. I want to take care. People matter, and if skill set matters, you take care of them. I think that's just always something that we've done. You obviously try and communicate your vision as clearly as you can. So this is where we're trying to go. Let's navigate it, X, Y, Z. So I think the main thing I always just say is just communication. I've always found like the biggest sort of separation between sort of people at the top and others is that there's no communication, or there's a miscommunication, or people don't really understand what's going on. I think we've always tried to bridge that gap as well as we can, to at least feel like we've given people as much information as we can. And if we're not the right company at a certain stage for someone, despite all of that, it's absolutely fine. We'll support you, and whatever next steps you are, we'll celebrate it. But I think that was a big thing for us. Yeah, it was just communicate and be transparent.
And one of the questions we often get on transparency is how far to go with the financial transparency. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, we are transparent with finance. So every single month we've got like a company update that we do with the team. Within that, we'll give sort of like a financial update where we were. So usually it's top level, so revenue, profit, etc. Obviously, when we became EO, we wanted to be even more transparent with the team. So in terms of especially focusing on profit. So this is what it means. This is why certain changes are being made here, or here's how we need to be smarter with costs. So I think it's always hard because I don't really see transparency as like a scale. I just see it as be transparent on what you think you need to be transparent on to get the best out of people. If there's things you just don't need to tell them and it won't have an impact either way, then don't. I think people are smart enough in the workplace to know I'm probably not being told every single detail, but they probably don't want to know every single detail. People don't need to see a full P&L, I don't think, every single month, but people want to see how much money have we made? What does that mean in terms of profitability? Where is that money going in terms of investments and costs? And I think being transparent on that will provide you value. I'll do it.
Yeah, good. So let's explore the employee ownership trust a little bit. You brought it up a couple of times. So yeah, take us through some of the things that you've learned and the rationale behind going down that route.
It's a relative. So at first, when we found out about it, we were like, why have we never heard of this? So I think firstly, it's fairly misunderstood. I don't think it's really talked about. It's not well advertised. So I think there's just under 2,000, I think, businesses in the UK that are employee owned.
Is that all? Actually, I didn't know that. Right. Okay.
Yeah. So it's just under 2,000. So it's growing. It is growing rapidly, especially in the last 4 years, but still not, I don't think, to the levels of obviously traditional M&As and exits. When we first announced it to the team, definitely not. They just didn't really get it. I think there were a lot of questions around like, are we getting shares ourselves? And stuff like this, where then you have to, I think we realized we probably should have and could have communicated that a lot better. So that was just a learning thing for us, which is fine. Obviously, since then, I'm also an independent trustee on Riverford's trust board. So the veg box delivery company, so 1,000 people, employee owned. And I think every business that's employee owned has similar challenges in that, it's a thing, but what does that mean for me as an employee? I still don't really get it. But the main things that we've sort of seen is sort of like there's definitely more accountability for people's work because they know the growth of the company results in sort of growth for them financially because they receive profit. You receive profit shares as an employee. Mm-hmm. I think secondly, there's definitely a bit more motivation. So when we went through quite a tough period, sort of like end of 22, early 23, cost of living crisis hit. Obviously, marketing budgets slashed. We kind of reached a bit of a period where we thought, okay, a lot of clients are slashing budgets. What are we going to do here? But just seeing the way the team sort of rallied around together with ideas, with implementation, with action, and then with sort of like just testing, we kind of went through that period pretty well. Like compared to a lot of other agencies, we actually pretty much sailed through it. Yeah. And I definitely put that down to the team, just feeling like, this is ours now. Like we need to do something about this. Can't just leave the founders to come up with ideas all the time. So it's two sides to it. But I think it's one of the best things that a business can do. If you're looking to sustainably have some kind of long-term plan for a business, I really think it's a great thing.
So can you talk us through some of the mechanics? What did it mean from your and Sam's ownership of the business? How did that side work?
Yeah, so the typical governance structure within the EOT. So you've got the company board. So that could just be, let's say, 3 founders or whatever it is. You'll then have a new trust board, which is made up of, usually it's a minimum of 3, but 3 trustees. So you'll typically have one of the sellers. So one of the founders, for example, if they sold their shares, you'll have an independent, someone that has nothing to do with the company who you've hired to be an independent voice, and one of the employees. So you've got a representative from the actual team that sits on that as is elected to be on that trust. And then typically you've then got the, people call it different things, but you could have a council. We have like a people committee. So it's basically a group of people who kind of come together every single month to talk about how can we make the company a better place to work. And any sort of like big things might be fed to the operational board, or they could be fed to the trust. So that's like a typical kind of like governance structure for an EOT. So when Sam and I sold our shares, we decided to sell 90% of the company.
All right. Okay.
We retained 5% each. That was more of there was no business logic to it. We just didn't want to let go of all of it. It was like a sentimental thing. So 90% of the company was sold to the employee ownership trust. The trust obviously holds those shares and protects them on behalf of all of the team. And then every employee is essentially a beneficiary of that. So they don't hold shares themselves, but the trust looks after it on their behalf. So that's typically how the process looks.
Very good. And how's that changed your attitude to the business, going from being a majority, or at least a majority shareholder, 50%, whatever, to 5? How's that changed your attitude?
I think it's a weird thing, because normally in a traditional M&A exit, people that are listening to this will probably think you sign on the dotted line, you will then get a windfall of some cash, let's say a couple of million for argument's sake, into your bank account, and you're left jobless and unemployed. So that's typically what happens in the space of 24 hours. With the case of an EOT, with us, we signed on the dotted line. The next day I was back at work as normal, same time, nothing had changed. No big lump sum in my bank account, because it's something that's agreed over a number of years. The shares are paid for. So I think it was one of those things where for at least the first few months, it didn't really feel that much change. And I think that was a weird thing to feel like, well, I am still a founder of this company, so I care about it as much as I did yesterday, but just my shareholding has changed a little bit. So I think initially it was a bit of a, well, what is this? Over time, I now don't really see myself anymore as a shareholder of my company I set up. I now feel just like I'm a founder of this business that is now made up of a lot more talented people than I am. And I am making decisions in certain areas and working on specific projects throughout the year to continue to drive the company forward. So I don't really think it crosses my mind every day around shareholder or anything like that. I've just become an employee like everyone else of a company that ironically I set up a few years ago. And I care about it, obviously, as much as I did a few years ago. It just changes the way you operate day to day now.
Okay. So what would, what lessons have you learned in going through the process? What would you pass on to others thinking about doing it?
I think first try and figure out obviously if it is for you. Obviously for a lot of people, they might not want that. They might just want like a quick, I want out and I want to sell it. That's totally fine. There's no right or wrong. So I think first figure out if you do want it. Secondly, have a very clear communication plan with the team. I think we rushed it. We did an offsite. We made like this big thing about it where we did it in a different venue. We were going to make like a big day out of it. I just don't think we planned the whole communication around what it is exactly and what it means for you as well as we could have. So I think definitely either work with someone who's potentially an expert in comms or ask your legal accounting teams for support on that as well. So I definitely think do that. And then I definitely think like seek advice from other EOTs. It's something that I didn't do early enough. Now I speak to them all the time. Right. And I'm also on the members council of the EOA, which is the largest organization of employee-owned companies in the UK. Right. So I get to speak to a lot of different employee-owned companies, but in the first year that we became employee-owned, I didn't really speak to many others. So you kind of feel a bit alone in it. You don't know what's the right setup, what isn't. You're kind of just going in dark and having to do a lot of research yourself. So I would have definitely probably communicated with others as well.
Yeah, good. And financially, what's it meant to your employees? What impact has it had on them?
So I think the first couple of years, so we do like a bonus or a profit share. So we've done that for the last 2 years. I think just given the nature of the economic climate and stuff, I don't think the team have fully realized the potential when it comes to that side of things. So they've received bonuses and stuff like that, but I think they would probably argue not to the elements of like, wow, I can really feel a difference. Yeah. Our plan is to get to that point our plan was always to get to that point within 5 years of becoming an employee owned, was to get to the point we're doing profit shares of, 20-25% of overall net profit. And if that's shared across the team, the size that we are, that's a lot of money for every single team member. So that's kind of like our plan. So I think to answer your question so far, I don't know if it's meant a huge amount, but what it does mean to them is they know that there's the potential there. They know if the company continues to grow with their input and their impact every single financial year, the gains could be amazing for everyone. And we just share that reward together. So,
yeah. And is it 5 year? Is it 5 years that you set up before you and Sam get your full amount of the money out, or is it?
It was set up to be sort of like between 5 to 7 years. So obviously it'd be less if there's more cash in the business. It'd be a bit longer if obviously we went through tougher times. So
yeah. And so it's, after that point, then once you're all paid out, then of course there'll be more profits to distribute with the rest of the employees. And if people are considering this, from a valuation point of view, compared to going out to market and selling, if you're fortunate enough to find and acquire, as you said, it's probably going to be a shorter payout period, although typically it might not be that much short. It might still be a couple of years, often with earnouts and things like that. What about the actual relative valuation of the business?
So we had the valuation done like we would have done for any exit. We had it done obviously by a third party. We had it done by an accountancy firm who did the valuation based on the exact same methodology that they would have used if it was another business. So they just did a multiple of EBITDA based on our industry standards. They then provided that to us. The only thing that goes through your head, which is different, if we were going through an M&A with a bigger company, we would try to eke out every single pound that you possibly could of that. Yeah. We were conscious that it was our own business that was going to be paying us. So we got a valuation figure. We kind of thought, this is amazing, but realistically, we don't know if the company will be able to pay this off, nor do we want this kind of level of debt. So we thought, okay, we're going to drop this. So we went back with kind of like a reasonable drop to the valuation to say, we think this is fair. Like, we're happy as shareholders with this. We think this is more realistic for the company. It's more sustainable, and over 5 to 7 years, based on our projections, we see this being paid with no problems. So it's kind of more in your hands compared to a traditional M&A.
Yeah, good. Okay, so in terms of then the rapid scaling up with the people, how one of the challenges that businesses typically face is being able to get both the strategy right and the execution right, and to bridge that gap. Now, the employee ownership trust you've mentioned is part of that. You were saying how that's helped with the employees feeling really part of it, and that is one of the challenges that a lot of business owners face, and complaints generally around they don't get it and they don't think in the same way that I do. So you've got some of that going. But what other things have you done to really help to bridge that strategy and execution gap?
Yeah, so we tried to do it across different ways. So first one was more like the internal ops side. So obviously from a policy perspective, we tried to introduce policies that we thought would like really attract the best kind of talent. So whether that was around holidays, whether that was around maternity, paternity, it was those kinds of policies we were like, if we could just be better than competitors, that already gives us a sort of like I guess an extra boost ahead of them. So there's that operational side. Then there's the more cultural side. So we wanted to create an environment where from the outside, people look at it and go, that looks really cool. That looks like a cool place to work that's thriving. But then as soon as you joined, you also still felt that it wasn't just something that appeared on the outside. So we've always tried to have like a culture of people celebrating each other. There's a lot of sort of like recognition, a culture of helping each other, a culture of development and training. So our whole thing was always like, however long you do spend here as an employee, we want you to look back and think that was probably the best period of time where I learned the most. And then the same with clients as well. We always say, however long we have a client for, we want them to look back and say, we experienced sort of like the most change from an SEO perspective with that agency, which resulted in this. So there's that side of things. When it comes to like recruitment side of things, so we've always been quite strict with our recruitment process. So we've got quite an in-depth recruitment process with like sort of 2 to 3 stages, which some people have argued that's quite a lot for our company our size. But the reason we've done that is because we do want to find the best talent that would be able to serve the brands that we work with. And to find that, I don't think we can just do it in like 1 or 2 quick sessions. You need to get to know them, the way they think, the way they're able to do a task, the way that they sort of interact with the rest of the team and stuff like that. So we're always quite big on that as well. And then obviously with the clients that we work with. So I think the brands that we work with naturally, like people are attracted to anyway, because we just love working with brands that we want to be customers of. So we try and work with some really cool D2C brands. Yeah. So we get people all the time sort of saying, like, I love working here because I get to work on cool clients, where before maybe they were working on some B2B like finance platform that they just had no interest in. So that's always been like a bit of a pull for us as well, obviously prior to the EO stuff.
Okay, and do you have a rhythm within the business? Do you have a quarterly planning rhythm, something like that, or annual planning? What's the way you do that strategically and bring that closer to execution as well?
Yeah, honestly, like our planning is constant. I don't really think we do it. So we have like, obviously, naturally, there'll be an annual plan, and naturally we'll have quarterly check-ins, and naturally there'll be sort of like monthly leadership catch-ups. But I think for us, like things change so rapidly because the size that we are, the stage that we are, that we're constantly adapting. So week to week, we're sort of having to review like the way we do certain things. Is this still what we need? That's just, I think, how we're operating at the moment, which probably sounds quite scatter, but I think for us it's essential. If we just sort of worked in, in 6 months we'll review this thing again, I don't really think we'd be able to be where we are right now. It sort of allows us just to be constantly making sure that we've got the right people in the right seats, so we've got sort of like the right sort of projects and stuff going on. So yeah, for us it's an ongoing thing, but we do have the regular checkpoints. Like I said, we set yearly plans and we do review them pretty much on a monthly basis.
Good. And you mentioned your recruitment process, three good 3 steps. What's specific that you can share about your recruitment process that others might find useful? Because that's another big challenge that everybody has is finding the right people in the first place and then making sure that they recruit them well. So how do you go about that?
I think it's having multiple people involved in the whole process, screening process. So like we've never, and I wouldn't necessarily advocate for it, but we've just never had an internal sort of like recruitment, like one single person that does recruitment, because we kind of found that multiple different people need to be involved to find the right talent first. So for example, Olivia, who's obviously our ops director now, but she was one of our early employees, she's involved in the screening process. She knows what NOVOS is. She knows what a person that works here, what they look like essentially, and what to look for. So that's like a first stage. And sort of like second stage, obviously we'll get the different delivery leads involved. So if it's for an SEO role, for example, we'll make sure that sort of like the senior people within SEO are there to be able to ask the right questions, to be able to grill, to understand sort of like specific things within tasks. And I think that's really important, just to ask the right questions rather than just someone presents to you, you say thanks, go away, and then make a decision. I think it's good to ask them and get them to think about the questions that we're asking as well. And then sort of like the third stage is sort of like a general, more like get to know. So it's like getting to know the wider team. So it might be your manager, it might be like the wider pod that you might work with. And I think doing that as well gets people on the same page. And again, is a good point for like both sides to figure out, is this what I actually want? So I think that's like probably the main thing I'd say is get different people involved and don't just silo it to one person or 2 people to make a decision to recruit, because ultimately I just don't think that'll ever work in the end.
And do you give any specific job role tasks or challenges to uncover whether they can actually do the job?
Yeah, we do tasks. Yeah. So the second stage is usually a task-based one. So it might be we usually always know, but it might be a case of like, we've got this brand. Can you please identify the reason for X, Y, Z? And then it might be like, we want to just like a few slides of what you think it was. And we'll always obviously have the answer. But equally, there's never usually a right or wrong one answer. There's like multiple ways you could get there. So what we try and analyze is just their way of thinking. Like even if their end response isn't necessarily right or wrong, we just want to see the way they think. And then that usually tells us a lot about, can we train them and can we give them the process needed to be the best that they can be? Or are they just going a completely different path to what we need?
Interesting. Yeah. So it's more explaining their workings and the way they think rather than necessarily what the outcome is, which is often something that in certain industries like consulting is what, they might ask you a wacky off the wall question, but the answer doesn't matter. Like how many hairs are there on the back of a Labrador? It doesn't matter whether what they don't want you to come up with is a number, because that's straight off. They want you to go, well, okay, don't know, but this is how I'd approach it, and take you thinking. Good. Okay. And what about your onboarding? Is there anything you do particularly with your onboarding?
Yeah, so we do. So with people on the team, so we've got on the first day, we'll always do, can you do it in the office? We give them a welcome pack. So that's kind of like an initial welcome to us. So it's everything you need. So obviously laptop, all the stuff you need, plus we'll do books, food, drinks, stuff like that, to kind of just like help them feel settled in. Then on the first day, you'll sit with your manager and they'll sort of go through all the tools, the softwares. We've got a whole so we use Notion, but on Notion, we've got a whole, this is kind of how we do it here. So it's a whole process made up of multiple steps of, this is our blueprint, this is what we do. And there's a good chance for them to spend a bit of time themselves to sort of go through it, pick out points that they need more clarity on. And then as part of that, we've got probably about a good 1 to 2 month process where we get them onboarded. So slowly sort of get them into certain client work, introduce them to clients, introduce them to wider team members, to trainings and stuff like that, up until sort of like the probation point, which is sort of like the 3-month mark, where by that point we usually have set sort of like some clear KPIs or things to be working towards by that point.
So have you set those KPIs right at the beginning so that people know what they're working to?
So they're set right at the beginning, but then we always obviously say, like, obviously we don't expect you by the end of 3 months, we'd love to see X, Y, Z. But obviously first 6 weeks is usually just get to know the agency rather than feeling like under pressure to deliver straight away.
Yeah, excellent. Very good. So, and in terms of the people then, how do you make sure that you've got strength in depth and you're not over reliant on any 1 or 2 key individuals, and you're impacted if for some reason that they leave the company or on health reasons or whatever? How do you reduce your dependency on some key people?
Yes, I think we've still got a bit of work to do on that, if I'm honest, but the way we've counteracted it so far, so we're very big on, like I said, written processes. So what's usually in someone's head, we try and get it down on paper as soon as we can. So throughout, so whether that's the way things should operate in certain teams, stuff like that. Obviously, we've got multiple different, I guess that we've got like a hierarchy and multiple different layers. So you've got like, there's directors, head ofs, senior managers, head ofs, senior strategist, then there's strategists. There's like a good 5, 6, 7 layers, which has been intentionally created to reduce the sole reliance on 1 or 2 layers. Yeah. So for example, the senior strategists, like we know we've got like a good layer of those. Above them, we've got the managers. So it's like everyone should really be on the same page anyway. So it's not reliant on one person. I think that's a great way to try and diversify the knowledge. But yeah, definitely getting as much as you can down from someone's mind to paper. We've found like pretty good thing to do over the last few years, where we've lost some really important talent as well.
Yeah. And how reliant is the business on you and Sam now?
Honestly, not really. So my time now is more on the sales front. I'd say on the new business and sales, probably it is quite reliant on both me and Sam, because it comes through our recommendations and network and people we meet at events. Yeah. We are trying, like it is an active project for this year to solve that and reduce that reliance a bit more. But yeah, with both of us, I don't think the business, if we both left tomorrow, I don't think the business would crumble. There would be gaps that would need to be filled and would take a while to fill. And I think what we're trying to do is reduce those gaps as much as possible, consciously, not with the intention of us leaving, but so we do become fairly like not needed, and instead doing things we actually feel like we want to do as well.
Yeah, good. And part of that, along with your succession planning, strength and depth, we'll go back to what you said about having a very strong training ethos within the business. So any tips there in terms of how you go about identifying training needs and providing training?
So you can definitely spot gaps anyway as a manager and like what's needed and stuff. A lot of the time we do just ask the individuals just to tell us. So we've got like a training request. So you just put in, so I want more training on X, Y, Z. Here's an example of a training. Can I go on it? And then we'll either say yes, or actually we think this might be more beneficial. So there's that side of it. But then obviously the other side of it is the managers, different heads of departments will sort of understand, well, currently in the last 6 months, we've really struggled on this one element of reporting. We're going to do an internal training around that. Can everyone please attend? So I think it's like a 2-pronged approach where you tell us if you need extra training on something, and we'll also tell you where we're currently seeing gaps or weaknesses and stuff.
Good. Excellent. So what's the legacy that you want to leave with NOVOS?
I'd love to leave a legacy where we built an agency that went on to do amazing and better things, and ultimately changed the, I guess, trajectory of the industry. So other SEO agencies follow suit, or other agencies look up to us as inspiration. And then obviously we're able to do more things in the future, whether that's around consulting or sort of other business ventures. But I think that's the legacy I want with NOVOS, is that we pioneered a new way to be an agency that ultimately set the tone for future agencies.
Brilliant. Excellent. And if we're sat here in 5 years' time, what do those 5 years hold? What does good look like?
What does good look like? Good looks like that I haven't aged too much and I haven't lost my hair. Good looks like that the agency is still thriving and is very profitable for the co-owners, so all the employees. So everyone's sort of benefiting from that. And yeah, I mean, ultimately, I don't think I want to leave yet either. So I guess I'm still there and still sort of showing the value that the trust wants me to show. So
brilliant. Excellent. Well, I've found this really interesting, Antonio. So thank you very much for being so open and sharing everything as well. Are you okay for a couple of quick fire questions before we close?
Of course.
So if you could go back to your younger self, to the young Antonio, what advice would you give yourself?
If you see an opportunity, go for it. I'm an overthinker. I'm an overanalyzer. So, and when I was younger, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I didn't know where life would take me. So, and everything that I've done to date has been because I just saw something and just went for it. So now that's my motto. If I was younger, I would just tell myself, go for it and it'll be fine.
Very good. Excellent. Any learning resources, whether they be books, podcasts, courses, whatever, that you particularly highlight for other entrepreneurs?
For other entrepreneurs, the main learning resources, I think, are other entrepreneurs. Oh. So I listen to many podcasts, I read many books. They're very useful for individual growth and ideas and inspiration, a lot of reading, but just having a chat with other founders, with other entrepreneurs, with other people, I think has been the thing that has actually leveled me up a lot more in the last few years. So I get to hear other people's way of doing things. I get to hear other people's problems, which makes you realize you're not alone, which gives you the confidence that you need to keep going, which I think is priceless. So yeah, there's a lot of books out there. I think everyone probably knows the standard ones. There's a lot of podcasts to listen to, some fantastic ones, 100%, definitely listen to them. My biggest learning resource has always been other people's brains, to be honest.
Yeah, I like that. Very good. And you've mentioned Notion already. What other apps or bits of tech do you find particularly useful that you'd highlight for other people?
Yeah, Slack. Slack is just a game changer for communication. I love Gmail. It's what I use all the time. The Google Suite, so Google Docs, Google Sheets, so much better than Microsoft Word and Excel. Mm-hmm. Those, yeah, I think those three I couldn't work without, to be honest. So
yeah, brilliant. All right. And you mentioned other people. Is there anyone who in particular has had the most influence on you as a business leader?
It's a very good question. I want to answer this as polite as possible, but no, I don't think there's one person that I think, yeah, this person changed everything. It's been a combination of mindsets, of ways of thinking, of cultures that I think has just shaped the way I like to think, the way I want to run a business, the way I want to build future businesses. And I think I just try and take the best of loads of different things and make my own framework in my head of how to do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Brilliant. Excellent. Well, it's been absolutely fascinating. Thank you very much, Antonio, for taking part in ScaleUp Radio. If people would like to get hold of you or find out more about NOVOS, what should they do? What's the best way for them to do that?
So you can follow me on LinkedIn. So Antonio Wedral, I'm on LinkedIn, or you can check out thisisnovos.com, which is our website as well. But feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and drop me a message if you want anything as well.
Brilliant. Well, Antonio Wedral, thank you very much indeed for being my guest today.
Thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed that discussion, and if you're building and scaling your own business, you might well be interested in our book, The Entrepreneurial ScaleUp System. And it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a practical handbook around scaling a business in a structured way. And you can order a copy on all your favorite online retailers, including an audio version, or you can find it and other supporting resources on our website, www.esusgroup.co.uk. That's esusgroup.co.uk, which is esusgroup.co.uk.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.